The Quiet Life. Daniel Harper woke up before the alarm. He almost always did. Not because he was eager for the day, but because his body had learned that sleep was something temporary, a shallow place you rested in for a few hours before returning to responsibility. The room was still dark. Not the comforting dark of night, but the thin gray darkness that comes just before morning decides whether it will be tined or not. Daniel lay still. The ceiling fan above him turned slowly, its soft clicking sound marking time more faithfully than any clock ever could. He watched it for a while. At 52, Daniel had learned that mornings were quieter when you didn't rush them. If he stayed still long enough, the day felt less demanding. Eventually, he sat up. His apartment was small, not unpleasant, just unfinished. A couch with cushions that no longer held their shape, a dining table meant for four, used by one, a bookshelf filled with library books he had already returned in his mind. The kind of place that didn't tell a story, only hinted that someone had once intended to live one there. Daniel made coffee the same way he always did. 2 scoops, water filled just below the line, no sugar. He drank it standing by the window, looking down at the street where people hurried past with purpose. At some point in his life, Daniel had been one of them. He used to believe that movement meant progress, that if you kept going, life would eventually make sense. Now, he wasn't so sure. He worked as a maintenance supervisor at the city's oldest public library. It wasn't a job people admired at dinner parties, but it was honest, quiet, predictable. The library smelled like old paper and patience. Daniel liked that. Books didn't interrupt you, they waited. That morning, he unlocked the side entrance just after 7. The building sighed open, as if relieved someone had finally come to take care of it. Daniel walked the halls slowly, checking lights, listening for pipes that sounded wrong, touching walls the way some people touched rosary beads. He had been here for 14 years, long enough that the building felt more familiar than his own past. As he worked, his mind wandered the way it always did in quiet places, to things he didn't plan to think about, to his daughter. Her name was Emily. He hadn't said it out loud in months, not because it hurt too much, but because saying it made him feel like he was pretending nothing had happened. Emily was 26 now. The last time they spoke, she was 19. The memory arrived uninvited, as it often did. A phone call, a raised voice, a sentence Daniel wished he could pull back into his mouth. "You're overreacting." That was what he had said. Not cruel, not violent, just dismissive. He didn't understand then how some words carry more weight than anger ever could. After that, there were emails he didn't answer quickly enough, apologies written too carefully, silences that stretched until they became permanent. Daniel told himself she needed space. Then he told himself she was busy. Then he told himself it was too late. By the time he realized none of those were true, the distance had already learned how to exist on its own. That afternoon, while repairing a loose shelf in the archives room, Daniel found something he didn't expect. A small envelope slipped between 2 filing cabinets, yellowed, soft at the edges. His name was written on the front. Not printed, written. Daniel froze. No one wrote his name anymore. He sat down on the cold floor, the envelope resting in his hands like something alive. His handwriting was familiar, painfully so. His mother's. She had died 6 years ago, quietly, in her sleep, the way she had lived. Daniel hadn't cried at the funeral. He stood next to the casket and felt nothing. That scared him more than grief ever could. Now, sitting alone in the library, he carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. He unfolded it slowly, as if rushing might erase the words. Daniel, if you are reading this, it means I never found the right moment to give this to you. I always thought there would be more time. I was wrong. His throat tightened. The letter wasn't long. It didn't need to be. I want you to know something I never said out loud. I didn't know how to love you the way you needed. I loved you the way I knew how. Sometimes that was not enough. Sometimes it hurt you. I see that now. We pass pain down the way we pass down eye color, not on purpose, just because we don't know how to stop. If you are carrying something heavy, please don't keep it the way I did. It doesn't make you stronger. It only makes you tired. Love your child while you still can. Say the words before silence learns your voice. Mom. Daniel sat there for a long time. The library continued breathing around him. The hum of electricity, the distant sound of a cart being pushed on another floor. Nothing dramatic happened. No breakdown, no sobbing. Just a slow, unfamiliar ache behind his eyes. Daniel folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. For the first time in years, he felt something shift. Not relief, not hope, just awareness. That evening, Daniel didn't turn on the television. He sat at the small table with the letter beside him, his phone lying face down. He picked it up, put it down, picked it up again. The screen lit up. No new messages. He opened his contacts, scrolled past names he barely remembered, stopped at one he never deleted. Emily Harper. His thumb hovered. Daniel wasn't brave enough to call, but he was tired of silence pretending to be wisdom, so he typed, slowly. No long explanations, no apologies stacked on apologies, just the truth. Hi, Emily. I don't know if you'll read this. I just want you to know I think about you every day, and I'm sorry I didn't listen when it mattered. He stared at the words. They didn't feel complete, but they felt honest. He pressed send. The message disappeared into the quiet. Daniel leaned back in his chair. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was waiting for something to end. He felt like something had begun. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. Inside, Daniel allowed himself to sit with the uncertainty, not as punishment, but as consequence. And somewhere far away, a life he had once touched continued breathing, unaware that a small shift had just occurred. Not yet. The family we fail quietly. Daniel slept poorly that night, not because his mind was loud, but because it was unusually still. Silence, when it arrives after years of noise, can feel like something is missing. He woke before dawn again, the letter still on the table where he had left it. For a moment, he wondered if reading it again would lessen its weight. It didn't. It simply settled differently. Daniel had spent most of his life believing that pain announced itself loudly, that if something was truly damaging, it would arrive with shouting or tears or broken objects. He had been wrong. The most lasting injuries in his family had been delivered quietly. At breakfast, Daniel found himself remembering his father. Not the man in his final years, but the version who lived behind routine and restraint. His father had worked in accounting, a reliable job, a reliable man. He came home at the same time every evening, hung his coat in the same place, sat in the same chair. There was comfort in that. There was also distance. Daniel couldn't remember his father ever raising his voice. He also couldn't remember being held. Not because his father didn't care, but because care in that house was expressed through silence and stability. Bills were paid, food was on the table, needs were met. Feelings were optional. Daniel had learned early that disappointment was something you handled alone. When he was 9, he brought home a drawing from school. It was clumsy, a house with uneven windows, a tree that looked more like a cloud. He placed it carefully on the kitchen table. His father glanced at it briefly and said, "That's nice." Then he folded the newspaper and went back to his numbers. Daniel stood there longer than he needed to, not because he wanted praise, because he wanted to be seen. Years later, when his own daughter showed him a story she had written, Daniel remembered thinking the same thing his father must have thought. "She'll be fine. She doesn't need encouragement. She's strong." He didn't realize until much later that strength, when assumed, often goes unsupported. At the library that day, Daniel found himself wandering into the children's section. He rarely worked there. The space felt too alive. Colorful rugs, low shelves, soft laughter from a reading group across the room. A young father sat on the floor, his daughter leaning against him as he turned the pages of a book. The child interrupted constantly, questions, comments, tangents that made no sense. The father didn't rush her. He answered each one as if it mattered. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest, not jealousy, recognition. He wondered how many moments he had missed while waiting for quiet to feel comfortable. At lunch, Daniel checked his phone. No reply. He hadn't expected one. Still, the absence sat differently now. Not as rejection, but as consequence. That afternoon, the archives room felt heavier than usual. Daniel worked slowly, distracted by memories he hadn't visited in years. His mother. She had been gentler than his father, but also quieter. She believed love meant not burdening others. When Daniel was 17 and failed a math exam that would delay his graduation, she told him everything would be fine. She didn't ask how he felt. She didn't sit with his fear. She simply smoothed it over. Daniel had learned that emotions were things you fixed quickly, or not at all. That lesson followed him into adulthood, into marriage, into fatherhood. When his wife, Laura, cried in the kitchen late at night, Daniel handed her solutions, suggestions, practical steps. He didn't know how to sit with pain that had no immediate answer. Laura left after years of trying to explain that she didn't need fixing. She needed presence. Daniel thought love meant staying. He didn't realize it also meant showing up. That evening, after work, Daniel drove past his childhood home. He hadn't planned to. His hands simply turned the wheel. The house looked smaller than he remembered. The paint had faded. The windows reflected a sky that had already started to darken. Another family lived there now. Lights on, movement inside, life continuing, unaware of the quiet lessons learned within those walls. Daniel sat in the car longer than necessary. He realized something then. He had spent years blaming himself for not being more expressive, for not being warmer, for not knowing how to reach his daughter in the way she needed. But blame had never taught anyone how to change. Understanding might. Karma, Daniel was beginning to see, wasn't about punishment. It was about inheritance. The habits we absorb, the silences we normalize, the love we pass down in incomplete forms. That evening, Daniel opened a notebook he hadn't touched in years. The first page was blank. He wrote slowly. Not an apology, not a confession, just observations. Things he remembered, things he wished he had said, things he was afraid to forget. He didn't know who the notebook was for. Maybe for Emily, maybe for himself. Before going to bed, Daniel checked his phone one more time. Still nothing. But for the first time, he didn't feel like silence was the end of the story.
He turned off the lights, and in the dark, he allowed himself to admit something he had never said before. He had loved his family. He had just never learned how to show it. And learning, even late, was still learning.
Karma is not punishment. Daniel woke to rain. Not heavy rain, just enough to soften the morning. The kind of rain that does not ask questions. He lay still, listening. Rain against glass, a distant car passing, his own breath. For years, he believed karma was loud, a crash, a loss, a sudden fall. Now he wondered if karma was quiet. He wondered if karma waited. Daniel made coffee. He did not rush. He noticed the steam. He noticed the warmth in his hands. Small things felt larger now. On the way to work, he passed a school. Children waited under umbrellas. A woman bent down to zip a jacket. A man wiped rain from a child's face. Daniel slowed his steps. He felt no regret in that moment, only awareness. At the library, the day moved slowly. Books returned, lights checked, floors cleaned. Daniel liked days like this. They gave him space. At noon, he checked his phone. Still no message. He placed the phone face down. This was new. Before, he would wait with tension. Now, he waited with acceptance. Karma was not a deadline. In the afternoon, Daniel repaired a broken chair. It was old, worn, one leg unstable. He could have replaced it. Instead, he fixed it, tightened the screws, smoothed the edges. When he finished, the chair stood firm. Not perfect, but usable. Daniel sat for a moment. He thought about his life. How many things he had replaced too quickly. How many he had tried to discard, people included. He remembered Emily as a child, her hands always moving, drawing, writing, asking. He remembered how tired he felt then, not from work, from life. He had told himself he would rest later. Later never came. Karma did not punish him for that. It simply carried the weight forward. That evening, Daniel stopped by the grocery store. An older man stood ahead of him in line. The man struggled with coins. Daniel waited. He did not sigh. He did not look away. The man smiled. "Thank you," he said. Daniel nodded. It felt good. Not heroic, just human. At home, Daniel opened the notebook again. He wrote a single sentence. "I am learning to stay." He closed the notebook. He sat quietly. Night came. Rain stopped. Daniel checked his phone one last time. A message waited. One message from Emily. His breath caught. He did not open it right away. He let the moment exist. He reminded himself of something important. Whatever she said was not a reward. It was not forgiveness yet. It was a consequence. He opened the message. "Hi, Dad. I saw your text. I do not know what to say yet, but I hear you." Daniel read it again, then again. No anger, no warmth, just honesty. Tears came then. Not loud tears, quiet ones, the kind that arrive when pressure leaves the body. Daniel did not reply right away. He understood something now. Karma was not a transaction. It was a direction. You do not say sorry to erase the past. You say sorry to change the future. He replied later, "Thank you for reading. I am here when you want to talk. No rush." He put the phone down. He felt lighter, not healed, but open. Days passed. Messages came slowly, short ones, neutral ones. Weather updates, work mentions, a photo of a cat. Daniel responded with care. No advice, no fixing, just presence. At work, Daniel listened more. He spoke less. When a coworker complained, he did not interrupt. When a child cried, he did not hurry them. He learned the weight of waiting. He realized something important. Karma does not chase us, it follows our habits. If we move fast, it follows fast. If we move gently, it learns to slow down. One evening, Daniel received a longer message. Emily wrote about her life, her work, her exhaustion, her fear of becoming distant like him. Daniel read without defense. He did not explain himself. He did not justify. He thanked her for trusting him. That night he slept deeply, not because things were fixed, because they were honest. Weeks later, Daniel visited his mother's grave. He brought no flowers, just words. He stood in silence. He whispered, "Thank you." Not for perfection, for effort. He understood now. His parents had done what they knew. He had done what he knew. Emily would do the same, unless someone stopped the pattern. Healing was not forgetting the past. Healing was choosing differently next time. Karma was not about balance. It was about learning. Daniel walked away from the grave. His steps felt steady, not certain, but grounded. He thought about the chair he had fixed, still old, still worn, but able to support weight again. So was his life. So was his heart. That night, Daniel wrote one final sentence in the notebook: "I will not pass silence forward." He closed the book. He turned off the light. He rested.
Life lesson. Karma is not punishment. It is memory. What we repeat becomes our future. What we face becomes our freedom. Healing begins when we stop running and choose to stay. Forgiveness comes softly. Daniel did not arrive the way Daniel imagined. There was no moment of relief, no sudden warmth, no clear ending. It came quietly, like light changing in a room. Daniel learned that forgiveness does not announce itself, it settles. Weeks passed. Messages between Daniel and Emily continued, short, careful. Some days there were none. Daniel did not push. He was learning a new rhythm, one without urgency. One morning, Emily sent a photo. A small kitchen, a mug on the counter, sunlight on the floor. Daniel stared at it longer than he should have. It felt like an invitation, not to enter, but to witness. He replied with one sentence, "It looks peaceful." Emily responded hours later, "It is, most days." Daniel smiled. Forgiveness often begins like this, not with words, but with shared quiet. At work, Daniel noticed changes in himself. When something broke, he did not feel irritated. He felt curious. What caused this? How long had it been ignored? He realized he was asking the same questions about people, about himself. One afternoon, a coworker snapped at him. Sharp words, tension. Daniel paused. He did not defend. He did not withdraw. He said, "Are you okay?" The coworker looked surprised, then tired. They talked. Nothing dramatic, just truth. Daniel understood something then. Forgiveness is not always about the past. Sometimes it is about the present moment, giving people space to be human. That evening, Daniel and Emily spoke on the phone, the first time in years. The call was awkward at first. Silence, breathing. Daniel resisted the urge to fill it. Emily spoke first. "I am not angry anymore," she said, "but I am still careful." Daniel nodded, even though she could not see him. "I understand," he said, and he meant it. They talked about small things, work, food, weather. Daniel wanted to say more. He wanted to explain himself. He did not. He remembered something important. Forgiveness does not grow under pressure. When the call ended, Daniel felt calm, Not happy, not sad, just present. That night, he dreamed of his father, not the distant man from memory, but an older version, tired, quiet. In the dream, his father sat at the kitchen table. Daniel stood across from him. No words were spoken. They simply looked at each other. Daniel woke with a strange feeling, not anger, not blame, understanding. He realized he had spent years forgiving himself for things his father never taught him. He had never forgiven his father for not knowing better. That day, Daniel visited a small park near his apartment. He sat on a bench, watched people pass. An elderly couple walked slowly, hands linked. A young mother corrected her child gently. A man sat alone, staring at his phone. Daniel thought about how everyone carried something invisible. Forgiveness began to feel less personal, less dramatic, more like a daily choice. Emily sent another message that night. "I might visit next month, if that is okay." Daniel read it twice. He did not rush to reply. He felt the weight of the moment. He typed slowly, "I would like that. No expectations." Emily replied, "Thank you." Forgiveness was not complete, but it was moving. Daniel cleaned his apartment that weekend, not in a hurry. He opened windows, let air move through old spaces. He noticed how many things he had kept out of habit, objects without meaning. He let some go. Forgiveness works like that too. Not everything needs to stay. He kept the notebook. He kept the letter from his mother. He kept the chair he had fixed. Everything else felt optional. On Sunday evening, Daniel cooked dinner for one. He set 2 plates without thinking, then paused. He put one back, not with sadness, with acceptance. Forgiveness does not erase absence. It teaches you how to sit with it. Emily arrived 3 weeks later. She stood at the door. Older, stronger, still familiar. They hugged briefly, carefully. Inside the apartment they talked about boundaries, about distance, about time. Daniel listened. He did not interrupt. When Emily cried, he did not reach for solutions. He stayed. That was enough. They walked through the city later, side by side, not touching. Forgiveness does not require closeness. It requires respect. When Emily left, she hugged him again, longer this time. "Not fixed," she said, "but better." Daniel nodded. Better was enough. That night, Daniel sat alone again, but the silence felt different. It no longer accused him. It rested with him. Forgiveness had not changed the past. It had changed the future. Softly, quietly, one moment at a time.
What remains? Daniel woke before sunrise again. But this time, the quiet did not feel empty. It felt full. Not with answers, but with space. He lay still for a while, listening to his breath, listening to the buildings settle, listening to life continuing without asking anything from him. He thought about the years behind him. They did not line up neatly. There were gaps, mistakes, moments he wished he could return to. But there was no sharp pain now, only a gentle awareness. Daniel made coffee, the same way as always, but the act felt different, less automatic, more present. He sat by the window. The street below was calm. A woman walked her dog. A delivery truck slowed at the corner. Someone laughed nearby. Ordinary sounds. Daniel realized something important. Ordinary was enough. At the library that day, Daniel moved through the building with ease. He fixed a loose handle, replaced a flickering light, helped a young student find a book. Nothing memorable, nothing impressive, yet everything felt meaningful. He understood now. A life does not need highlights to matter. It needs continuity. During lunch, he opened his notebook.
He read the early pages. They were heavy, full of regret, full of fear. He did not tear them out. They were part of the story. He turned to the last page, blank. He wrote one line, "I am still here." That was enough. Emily sent a message that afternoon. "Just checking in," she wrote. Daniel smiled. He did not analyze the words. He did not search for hidden meaning. He replied, "I'm glad you did." They did not talk every day anymore. They did not need to. Their connection was no longer fragile. It was simple, and simple things last. That evening, Daniel cooked dinner again. This time, he set 2 plates. Not because Emily was coming, because he liked the possibility. Possibility was something he had avoided before. It used to feel dangerous. Now it felt alive. After dinner, he washed the dishes slowly. He noticed how warm water felt on his hands, how quiet the kitchen was. He remembered his mother, standing at the sink, moving carefully, trying not to disturb anyone. Daniel wished he could tell her something now. You did not fail. You just carried too much alone. He did not feel anger toward his parents anymore. He felt clarity. They had done what they could with what they knew. So had he. So would Emily. That was not tragedy. That was humanity. Later, Daniel took a walk. The air was cool. The sky dimmed slowly. He passed familiar streets. Some places held memories, others did not. He realized something surprising. Memories no longer pulled him backward. They stood beside him, like old companions. At the park, Daniel sat on the same bench as before, the one where he first understood forgiveness differently. A couple sat nearby, talking softly. Daniel did not listen. He respected the quiet. He looked at the trees, at the way their branches reached without certainty. Some leaves fell, others stayed. Nothing rushed. He thought about karma again, how much it had scared him before. He used to think karma waited to judge him. Now he saw it clearly. Karma was not watching, it was remembering. It carried patterns forward and allowed change when someone noticed. Healing did not require perfection. It required attention. Daniel had paid attention. That was enough. When he returned home, he opened the letter from his mother one last time. He read it slowly, not with pain, with gratitude. She had given him something rare, honesty. He placed the letter back in its envelope, put it in the drawer. Some things did not need to be visible. They only needed to be held. Before bed, Daniel checked his phone. A final message from Emily. "Thank you for being patient. I feel calmer lately." Daniel closed his eyes. He did not reply right away. He let the words settle. He felt something deep and steady, not happiness, peace. He replied simply, "So do I." Daniel turned off the light. He lay down. The room was dark, but not heavy. His life was not perfect. Some relationships would never fully mend. Some choices could not be undone. Some days would still feel lonely, but the loneliness no longer frightened him. It had edges now, and edges can be touched. As sleep approached, Daniel thought about what remained. Not the years lost, not the mistakes made. What remained was intention, attention, the willingness to stay present even when it was uncomfortable. What remained was connection, not constant, not loud, but real. What remained was a quieter heart, one that no longer ran from consequence, one that understood healing as a process, not a destination. Daniel breathed out, slowly. Tomorrow would come, and he would meet it, not as a man trying to fix the past, but as someone willing to live gently forward. That was enough. Final life lesson. A life does not need to be perfect to be healed. Karma is not punishment, it is the echo of what we repeat. When we slow down, when we listen, when we choose presence over avoidance, the echo changes, and what remains is peace, quiet enough to sleep. Subscribe to join our 1,000-day journey of healing and life lessons. Tell me in the comments, what is one broken thread you are mending today? Like and share this with someone who needs a peaceful night.